FoxTail flew under my radar, but I remember seeing it before, I think, on Steam Greenlight. It was announced around 2015 with a Kickstarter and Indiegogo campaigns, but were unfortunately unsuccessful. But it seems that did not stop the developers and they continued working on the game. It's 2018 and the game is finally out, and if you really want a deep dive into a point-and-click adventure game straight out of the 90s, I cannot recommend it enough. What is it? It's a throwback to point-and-click adventure games such as Legend of Kyrandia, King's Quest or Monkey Island, and it's not unreasonable to compare it to these games, especially when it comes to the visuals. For me, however, it reminds me a lot of Inherit the Earth with its anthropomorphic animal world setting with a much more warm and cute art style. And that's one of the strongest things about the game, the art style. FoxTail knows exactly what it wants, where to draw its limitations, and it absolutely indulges in it. It does use pixel art to mimic the aesthetics of old DOS games and match the old school screen resolutions, but it goes that extra step further with attention to small details. Like the fact that the game does indeed operate in Full HD, but moving the mouse a tiny bit makes the cursor snap to a retro pixel grid instead of giving you full smooth movement like some retro games do. And whenever the game needs to do any scaling, for example a character moving into the distance, every frame of animation is handmade instead of using transform effects seen in other games. And before I continue, I don't mean to bash games that do this kind of stuff. It's perfectly fine. But the fact how it's not used here gives the game that real feeling of authenticity, like it's a title plucked from the 90s PC gaming scene and resurfaced after years. Even the dialogue font in the game fits the era. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same one you'd find in like ScumVM titles, but it's pretty spot on. The story is you're Leah, a red fox who's visiting her grandmother in a small countryside village. She invited you over for a visit and like a loving grandma baked a pie. And what goes well with pie is some good old-fashioned tea. But unfortunately it ran out. And so begins your epic tale of getting tea. I actually really like how this game approaches the story. A lot of adventure games expose your main goal of a story very quickly, usually defining your end goal in the intro. FoxTail starts with a simple premise that starts spiraling out as you try to achieve your goals, and suddenly grabbing some tea turns into a mini adventure of sorts. I also adore how the game uses this as an opportunity to indulge in a trip down memory lane, gracefully shedding light on the backstory of our characters and world as Leah visits places she remembers from her childish past. Unfortunately, the game does not feature any voice acting, but what it does feature is gorgeous artwork. Backdrops are amazing and they really fit the era they're trying to emulate spot on. Like I said before, it really looks and feels like something straight out of the 90s. Each scene uses a limited palette of colors, giving it a certain vibe instead of being just another location, and every single one of them is very memorable. And initially the overall feeling is very warm, welcoming, which fits the theme of visiting your past very well. Speaking of themes, like musical ones, they're also pretty good. Even though as of recording of this audio it's been a few days since I played the game, I can perfectly remember almost all themes of the game that I encountered, as they're really memorable. I think one of the favorite ones is Corsack's theme. The main instrument is, I think, a bassoon, and the melody really fits well into the character of an old, deaf and quirky herbalist. Gameplay-wise, this is nothing out of the ordinary, and I haven't encountered moon logic levels of puzzle difficulty. What I noticed though is that the game likes to reuse items that are consumable. A great example would be the candy and the pie. You can often use them and not get anything in reward, like giving fruits to grandma and stuff. This also means that you either end up reloading the game or running back and forth picking those items back again in order to try something different. The game also likes to shower you with items, some of which so far I have not found a single use for them, and I'm not really sure if they'll ever have a purpose. As you play along, it turns out that your grandmother is very sick and only Corsac can create a medicine for her, but he's too old to find the proper ingredients, so he sends you off on a task to find them. I actually like that the goal is quite heartwarming, instead of the typical revenge / rescue / doing the right thing kind of theme. There's only one tiny problem. That's where the early access ends. I've completed the first chapter of the game in 3 hours, so for $7 it's not that bad of a deal, especially since the rest of the game will come out later. We just don't know when or how many chapters there will be. I don't think there's a lot of incentive to play adventure games in parts, but then again, people do love Telltale's games and their approach to episodic content. That being said, if you want to support the development of this game, you can just drop the $7 and just wait for it to come out in full. And that's the price for the whole game as far as I'm concerned, and not just for a single episode. So it's not really a big of loss if this gets abandoned. Personally, this one gets a very strong recommendation from me, even though it's not out yet. Completely out, sort of. Partially out, but not really. It perfectly encapsulates the feel, look and gameplay of a 90s adventure game. And that's something I really like. My name has been TRG, and I will see you sometime in the next video, I guess. More Shrek incoming.